Hello. Here I am in the somewhat unusual setting of my garden. Unusual because, much to my mother's eternal regret, I'm not much of a gardener, not really much of an outdoorsy person at all. I don't really spend that much time out here. Of course, in the last few weeks, I've got used to spend a lot more time in my garden. I'm really aware how fortunate I am to have a garden at the moment. But I don't really want to talk much about how much we're using our garden in these present circumstances. But I do want to talk about gardens, about two gardens in particular. And the first one I want to talk to you about is an old garden, ancient. In fact, it's the oldest garden there is, the first garden, the first one that there was. I'm talking about the garden God planted in Eden, in the second chapter of Genesis, the garden he planted for men and women to live in. It's a garden that speaks of God's goodness, his gift of creation, God's good creation of which we are a part. But more than that, in the book of Genesis, this garden is a sign. It's a symbol that the world as it should be. It's the right place for humans to be in. It's a place where they will flourish. It's a place where men and women may be at peace, peace with God, peace with one another, and peace with the world around them. It's no surprise then that after that awful moment when humans turn away from God, when they sow discord between one another, then they have to leave the garden. It's a way of telling us that peace has been broken, that creation has been set out of joint, that God's good creation has taken a wrong turn. It's heading down a dead end. And humans leaving the garden is a symbol of that brokenness. But if so, then the solution seems obvious. Find a way to get back into the garden. Find a way to set things straight. Find a way to return to Eden. After all, the garden is where God is, right? Surely God is back there, calling us back, waiting for us to put ourselves right, to make amends for the mistakes that we have made. As humans, we've tried all sorts of things to try and get back there. Religion, technology, wealth, success, power, all sorts of things to try and make up for the wrong that we've done. But to no avail. The more we try, the more we seem to make a mess out of the world. It's like we're trying to clamber up a slope but keep slipping further and further down. Or like having broken something, only to try and fix it and to have broken it more. The way back to that first garden remains elusive to us. This is the tragedy of creation. I'm not just talking about some grand general terms about the human condition. I'm talking about our lives as much as anything. Which of us hasn't made a mistake that we just can't put right? Which of us has made a choice that's put us at odds with those around us? Which of us, on a number of occasions, has put God out of our minds because his way is inconvenient to us, only to regret it moments later? I know I have. And which of us hasn't desperately tried to put things right, to put the pieces back together again? Which of us haven't thought, if only I could be a bit better, a bit more holy, a bit cleverer, a bit happier, a bit more attentive to others, a bit more attentive to God, then I might find my way back? Which of us hasn't tried to find our way back into that garden and assumed that we could make it up to God if only we tried a bit harder? I know I have. The tragedy of creation is that the road to Eden remains elusive to us. But the garden in Eden isn't the only garden in the Bible. There's another one I want to tell you about. Listen to this. We're reading from John's Gospel, chapter 19, beginning at verse 38. Afterward, Joseph of Arimathea, who had been a secret disciple of Jesus because he had feared the Jewish leaders, asked Pilate for permission to take Jesus' body down. When Pilate gave permission, Joseph came and took the body away. With him came Nicodemus, the man who had come to Jesus at night. He brought about 75 pounds of perfumed ointment made of myrrh and aloes. Following Jewish burial custom, they wrapped Jesus' body with the spices in the long sheets of linen cloth. The place of crucifixion was near a garden, where there was a new tomb never used before. So because it was the day of preparation for the Jewish Passover, since the tomb was close at hand, they laid Jesus there. Early on Sunday morning, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and found that the stone had been rolled away from the entrance. She ran and found Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved. She said, "They've taken the Lord's body out of the tomb. I don't know where they have put him." Peter and the other disciple started out for the tomb. They were both running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He stooped and looked in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he didn't go in. Then Simon Peter arrived and went inside. He also noticed the linen wrappings lying there, while the cloth that had covered Jesus' head was folded up, lying apart from the other wrappings. Then the disciple who had reached the tomb first went in, and he saw and believed. For until then they still hadn't understood the scriptures that said Jesus must rise from the dead. Then they went home. Mary was standing outside the tomb crying, and as she wept she stooped and looked in. She saw 2 white-robed angels sitting at the head and the other at the foot of the place where the body of Jesus had been lying. "Dear woman, why are you crying?" the angels asked her. "Because they've taken away my Lord," she replied, "and I don't know where they have put him." She turned to leave and saw someone standing there. It was Jesus, but she didn't recognize him. "Dear woman, why are you crying?" Jesus asked her. "Who are you looking for?" She thought he was the gardener. "Sir," she said, "if you have taken him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will go and get him." "Mary," Jesus said. She turned to him and cried out, "Rabboni," which is Hebrew for teacher. "Don't cling to me," Jesus said, "for I have not yet ascended to the Father, but I go to find my brothers and tell them I am ascending to my Father and to your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene found the disciples and told them, "I have seen the Lord." Then she gave them his message. This was the second garden that I wanted to talk to you about. For this is the garden in which Jesus is buried and where he is raised from the dead. John is beginning to give us pointers that this garden, well, we should look at it a bit like that first garden in Eden. After all, did you notice that all this happened on the first day of the week? We know creation happens in successive days in Genesis 1. Days are really important. And did you notice how John specifically tells us that Mary mistakes Jesus for the gardener? Not just for anyone, but for a gardener. The one who plants the garden, just like God did in Eden. It's like John is saying, remember that first garden. Remember that it stood for creation itself. Well, here's another one that stands for something even more amazing. For in this garden, the new creation is born. As Jesus is raised from death to life, and the new life of his resurrection begins to spread throughout the cosmos, and creation begins to be reborn. You see, the resurrection of Jesus is not just about the end of life and the beginning of a new life for one person. It's not just like a happy ending for a rather sad story. John is bending over backwards to point us out that it's so much more than that. This is about the whole of creation. It's about how tragedy is turned to joy. It's about how the future of the universe is not paradise, but something even better. It's about new creation. Creation reborn. Because it turns out that humans were never supposed to return to that garden in Eden. God was not waiting for us there. Neither did he ever require us to meet a certain standard so we could regain admittance. No, instead, God plants a new garden, and Jesus is the gardener, the forerunner of everything that God is going to do to the universe. He brings forth new life, new hope, new possibility by the power of his resurrection. The first creation was marked in tragedy. This second one is marked in hope, which is good news for us. Because while we were chasing after Eden, trying harder and harder to please God, it turns out he was planting a garden that was even better. and we didn't have a thing to do with it. While we thought God was in some far-off place waiting for us to sort our lives out, turns out he's actually right behind us, calling our name and inviting us to share in this new future with him. This is what Jesus' resurrection is all about. New hope, new life. And the invitation for us is to be a part of that. Not that the old is rejected or thrown away, but it is transformed. It is made even better, better than the perfection it achieved in creation. And it's found in this garden. For this garden is not found in Eden, but it's found in our lives. It's found wherever God's new creation breaks forth, wherever there is hope, wherever there is peace, wherever there is understanding, wherever there is love, there the new creation breaks forth. It breaks forth wherever our heart proclaims that Jesus is alive. Amen.